In this video, I'm going to talk about the side effects of when adding the box sizing property. One of the first things we set when we're introducing a CSS grid system is to set the box sizing property. And we do this to all elements. So we use the asterisk selector because that will apply it to all elements. And then inside here, the property that we're setting is box sizing. And we're going to set it to border box. Now the default is content box. And what this does is this identifies what the height and the width properties measure. So content box, which is the default, says to measure height and width based on the content only. So when you say the height, you're specifying how high the content is. And any padding or border outside that will make it bigger. And so when we say border box, then we say the height specifies the content, the padding, and the border. So now we set that final property, and that's going to be the maximum property. No matter how big we make the padding or the border, it's not going to get bigger than that height or that width. And so what will happen is it'll make the border bigger and make the content smaller, so that you don't ever get out of that. So it really specifies where the height and width measurements come from. And now once we set this, we're setting this on the common style sheet for the entire website. So we need to make sure what's being impacted by this. And it's going to be things that have a height and a width and have a padding or border as part of them. So if we scroll down here, we see that in this particular header that has a height that is 180 pixels and it has a padding. So this makes a difference. But notice here that the box sizing property has already been set to border box for this element. So this will make no difference. It's already set. And in fact, we can get rid of this property because now that we've set it on all elements, it will apply to this one. And this will make no difference then. Then we look down here. Now we're in the paragraph part. And here there's a height set, but there's no padding or border. So no problem with, nothing will change in that. If we keep looking, then we find that the nav, so these would be our nav buttons right here, they have a specific height and no padding, but they have a border value. So when this was content box, it said make the content 46 pixels big, and then it added 2 pixels of borders on the top and the bottom and the left and the right. Now we're saying make it 46 pixels big, including the border. So they will actually get smaller. Let's save that and watch it happen. There, did you see them get smaller? Because now it's measuring clear to the edge of the border. So if we want them the same size, we have to make the height big enough for the 46 pixels of content plus 2 pixels of the top border and 2 pixels of the bottom border. That's an additional 4 pixels. So there we have 50 pixels. Now we're going to want to change the line height too, because that's what we were using to make sure that our text filled the whole thing and was centered within that. Now if we save that and we go back and refresh, then we get it back to the size that we originally had. Okay, that one's taken care of, and that's the end of our common style. And that's everything that applied to the home page and the scientific method page. But now we have the WISE telescope had another style sheet, and that's the wisestyle.css. So we have to do the same thing here. We have to look for things where the height or width are set and there's a border or padding or a border. So if we look here, no height and width, no height and width. Okay, now these ones are actually images, which means they have a height and width set, but not in the CSS. The height and width are set in the HTML, but it still applies. So we have to pay attention to these because they have height and width set. Even though we can't see it, we know it's in the HTML. But these don't have any padding or border, so we're okay. This has a padding, but it's a paragraph, not an image, and the paragraph doesn't have a height or width. No padding or border, paragraph, no padding or border, paragraph. All right, here we have a padding, and it's actually on the Galaxy image when we hover. And that's the only one we have to worry about. So if we go look at the WISE telescope and we go down here to the hover, remember that we made it so that when it hovered, it kind of stayed in position and just got bigger. But notice what happened. Did you see it? So here it's proportional, and it's measuring just the outer edge of that image, because that's the full height and width. There's no padding or border, and so it's the full height. But as soon as we hover, now it has a padding right now. Watch it. You'll see that padding fill up some of that width. There you go. See how it got narrower? That's that padding filling up that width. So what we need to do is we need to change the size so that it's big enough to hold it. Okay, so if we look in the HTML for that class Galaxy, we see that it is 400 wide. So now we need it to be 400 wide plus enough room for that padding. So we need to change the width to 475 pixels. And notice we only need that on hover because that's only where we need that padding. So now it should be big enough to hold it when we hover as well. So I'll refresh and it stays wide enough, but notice the wide is jumping. It's not transitioning. So we had this transition. We said transition the transform property, transition the padding right property. Let's also transition the width so it's not jumping the way it just was. So we'll also do width for 3 seconds, and that should transition the width the same times as the others. And refresh. Now when we scale it, there it goes. Now we don't see any jumping, and we see it taking up the right amount of space. So whenever you add border box, now one way to fix this is to add this when you very first start, and then things kind of shape up the way you expect. But now that we're adding it after the fact, we want to go through every element and look for those that have the height or width set and also a padding and a border. And those are the ones that we'll have to adjust the height and width measurements for to accommodate this change of measuring from the border box instead of the content box.